In this video, we're going to be ranking every team in the NFL, doing quick breakdowns of their roster and what to expect heading into next season. And the last team in my power rankings is going to be the Washington Commanders. I've got these roster graphics for each team, and I've rated every player in the NFL from 65 to 99 according to this rating scale. The player ratings get normalized into scores for each position group, and then those get combined into overall offensive and defensive scores based on this weighting table. So I've got the Commanders ranked 31st in offense and defense. They're pretty much in phase one of a rebuild, and unless Jayden Daniels completely hits the ground running, I don't have major expectations for the Commanders this year. They are starting out with a pretty good group of receivers. Really like Sam Cosmi at right guard. I think he has all-pro potential. The defensive line's pretty good, although I thought Jonathan Allen had a bit of a down year last season. And then guys like Frankie Louvu, Jamin Davis, Derek Forrest all have potential, but the offensive line overall is still a weakness. Their edge rushers aren't very good, and cornerback is a major concern for me. This is a team where you're just hoping to see some promising things from young players and kind of build an identity heading into next season. At 31, I've got the New Orleans Saints, which I think is a lot lower than most people have them, but I have them with the worst offense in the NFL, and that's led by the worst offensive line. Some of the depth chart stuff I'll be adjusting over the next couple weeks as we see who's winning training camp battles and who's playing certain positions. That specifically applies to some of the offensive lines, but it shouldn't change the overall ratings too much. It seems like the Saints are going to have the rookie Fuaga at left tackle and then Trevor Penning moving over to the right side. I think both tackle spots will be a real liability for this offense. Eric McCoy is one of the better centers in the NFL, but I don't expect them to have very good guard play either. Derek Carr is a fine quarterback, not really an elevator. I like their receivers. Hopefully A.T. Perry can show some growth in year two, but they need Penning to take a major step forward and Fuaga to at least be serviceable as a rookie. I really like the back seven on defense. Demario Davis and Tyrann Mathieu are stars. Marshawn Lattimore's a great man corner when he's healthy. Paulson Adebo really broke out last year, but Alontae Taylor was not able to build on a pretty good rookie season. But the defense still ranks 26th because I don't think their edge rushers are very good, and Bresee could take a step forward in year two, but can't feel too confident in that happening. And at 30, I've got the New York Giants, who have the second worst quarterback room in the NFL, in my opinion. And Andrew Thomas is an all-pro caliber left tackle, but the offensive line is very weak outside of that. Jermaine Illuminor, their second best offensive lineman, I just saw got injured on the first day of training camp, so that's not a great start. Obviously, Malik Neighbors is a huge upgrade at receiver, but outside of that, I don't feel like they did enough to significantly improve their offense from last year. Defensively, they're pretty solid up front. They added Brian Burns off the edge. Dexter Lawrence I have as tied for the best defensive lineman in the NFL. And then Bobby Okereke had a great season. I think one of the more underrated linebackers in the league, but I have the safeties as the worst in the NFL, and cornerback they rank 30th. I really like Deonte Banks. Trey Hawkins was an interesting prospect, but pretty up and down when he was on the field last year. And they drafted Andrew Phillips, who I expect to start in the slot, but I was not a huge fan of his college tape, and I don't feel very confident in any of their depth. And then to round out this bottom tier, we've got the Carolina Panthers coming in at 29, new head coach Dave Canales. For any of these teams with rookie or second-year quarterbacks, obviously so much of it hinges on the quarterback's development. I don't think Bryce Young was as bad as his stats would indicate last year, but no way you can really justify last season as a good rookie year. So you need to step up from Bryce, specifically in pocket navigation and sack avoidance, but they also did a decent job of addressing the supporting cast and surrounding him with players that should help him succeed. They had Deontay Johnson, who's one of the best intermediate separators in the league. They draft Xavier Legette in the first round. They added two of the biggest guards in the NFL with Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt. On paper, the offensive line is actually pretty solid. Their biggest issue last year was the injuries. You know, they're playing their 6th, 7th, and 8th offensive linemen every week, it seemed like. So I have the offense ranked 27th, but I at least see a lot of avenues where they could improve on that ranking. And then defensively, they rank 25th. Like every team in the NFC South, I don't think they have very good edge rushers. Derek Brown is a stud on the defensive line. The linebackers are solid. Shaq Thompson, Josie Jewell, Trevin Wallace as a developmental player. And their cornerbacks are also solid. J.C. Horn is very good for the 5 to 6 games that he plays every year, but you just can't really trust him to stay healthy. If you can get a full season out of Horn and Jadeveon Clowney can repeat pretty much his career year as a pass rusher, again, there are avenues for them to be better than the 25th best defense. It's just a team across the board where there's so many if statements at every position. And then we've got a tier of 5 teams that are extremely closely rated. I wouldn't predict them to make the playoffs, but if a few things went right, they could absolutely be playoff contenders. And that starts off with my 28th ranked team, the Las Vegas Raiders. Top to bottom, this is actually a pretty good roster, but the most important position group, quarterback, they ranked last in the NFL. Aiden O'Connell could exceed my expectations, but it's hard to feel too confident in him because it just felt like every game last year we got a different version of what he is as a quarterback. The receivers are really good. They have 2 promising young tight ends. On the O-line, they've got Colton Miller, who's one of the most underrated left tackles in the NFL. Andre James has steadily improved every season. Jackson Powers-Johnson, I think, should be good, but he's got some injury issues. And then a lot of exciting pieces on defense, especially up front. Max Crosby, one of the best edge rushers in the NFL. Malcolm Kuntz really emerged over the second half of last year. They added Christian Wilkins, who's a very good defensive tackle. And then whatever you can get from Tyree Wilson, whether it's on the edge or the interior, is kind of icing on the cake. I really like some of the flashes we've seen from Jack Jones. He just got to stay on the field consistently. I think CB2 is a weakness with Jacorian Bennett, but I really like DeCamarion Richardson as a prospect. Hopefully he can win that CB2 job. And then Trayvon Moehrig is a quality safety, so they have good players at every level of the defense. If Aiden O'Connell takes a huge step forward, they've got all the pieces for this to be a competitive roster. I just don't really see that happening. Next up, I've got the Cardinals at 27, one of the biggest splits between offense and defense. I actually think this should be a pretty exciting offense next year. I've always been a big Kyler Murray fan. I thought his play coming back from injury last year was kind of inconsistent, but I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt with an 84 rating that he can get back on track. Their receivers ranked 29th, which I think speaks more to how good the receivers around the NFL are, because I like 1, 2, 3. Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously, we've evaluated him for 6 months now. Michael Wilson, I think, is a solid wide receiver too, and Greg Dortch has been an unsung hero for the last few years. Trey McBride, I know, has gotten a lot of fantasy hype. I think he's one of the next complete do-it-all top 5 tight ends. And then as of right now, they don't have any stars on the offensive line, but I could easily see Paris Johnson Jr. emerging into that. Hajalte Froholt had a really good season last year, and then Will Hernandez, Jonah Williams are solid starters. Kelvin Beachum is some of the best tackle depth across the league. But to me, this is the worst defense in the NFL. They rank 31st at edge rusher, 30th at defensive line, 32nd at cornerback. BJ Ojolari played a rotational role last season, had some flashes as a pass rusher, but you want him to put it all together. Dennis Gardeck and Victor Demukajay are solid, but not players that really move the needle. Outside of Darius Robinson, I don't have a lot of confidence on anyone on the interior. And then at cornerback, they've at least got a lot of options, but they're all unproven. Max Melton and Elijah Jones are rookies. I liked both of them as prospects, but rookie corners usually struggle. Sean Murphy-Bunting is a replacement level starter, and then Garrett Williams started a lot of games last year, but his tape was really difficult to evaluate. The Cardinals ran as much quarters coverage as anyone in the NFL, and I was planning on doing a video on Garrett Williams, but I'm watching through all of his tape and it's like there are 0 man coverage, true one-on-one reps to even evaluate. He's another player that I like coming out of the draft, but we'll just have to wait and see what he develops into. The safety room is pretty good, but I just don't think they have the personnel to be a good defense this year. And then at 26, I've got the Patriots, who are kind of the opposite team. Jacoby Brissett, I expect to be the starter, although I do have a higher grade on Drake May. I think either way, the quarterback play should be solid and definitely a step up from what they had last year. I really like Pop Douglas as a second or third complementary receiver, and then Kendrick Bourne, Jalen Polk, I view as wide receiver 3s ideally, but they don't have a true wide receiver 1, so I think that's something that will hold this offense back, along with the offensive line. The main weakness here is Chuks Okorafor. Sidy Sow showed some nice things as a rookie. David Andrews is their best offensive lineman. Cole Strange has not been worth the first round pick, but he's a starting caliber left guard. And then you're hoping that Caden Wallace can win one of the tackle spots, because Mike Onwenu is much much better on the inside. But the defense is pretty good. There's a lot riding on Matt Judon coming back full strength from injury. Keon White showed some flashes, but you want him to put that all together into more consistent play. You've got Anthony Jennings, who's a great run defender. Josh Uche was very disappointed with his 2023 performance. He's always been one of my favorite pass rushing specialists, but was just not as efficient last year. But Christian Barmore really broke out and emerged as one of the best 3-techs in the NFL. I think he could have a big season on the way. The linebackers are a very specialized group. Jawan Bentley and Jelani Tavai are two of the best stack and shed linebackers in the league, but as far as complete rangy linebackers, they don't really add that element. And then I'm excited to see this cornerback room. Christian Gonzalez's rookie year was outstanding, the 4 games that he played. Jonathan Jones is a solid cornerback too, and I loved Marcus Jones as a prospect, loved what he showed as a rookie. He missed almost all of last year, so getting back will be huge for the secondary. And then Jabril Peppers is another one of the most underrated players in the NFL. I actually had him on my All-Pro second team last year. He's one of those do-it-all defensive backs that was finally being used in a way that maximized his skill set. And at 25, I've got the Denver Broncos, who I view as slightly below average in both phases, 26th on offense, 24th on defense. I think quarterback and edge rusher are the 2 positions where I see them having a real path to perform better than this. I liked Bo Nix as a prospect, definitely more than most people did, but still in that mid-first round range, so not a sure thing. Cortland Sutton's a very good receiver. Josh Reynolds is a solid wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. And then Marvin Mims, Tim Patrick, Troy Franklin. I think there is a lot of upside with that trio. Mims didn't really show anything outside of being a deep threat last year, so if he can develop a more well-rounded game, he could end up being better than a 74. Tim Patrick's great. He's just had such brutal injury luck. And Troy Franklin, I was lower on him than some other people, but still thought he was a steal where they got him. The O-line should be pretty good. Just re-signed Quinn Miners. Center is the one major weakness here. I've got Luke Wattenberg as the starting center, but I also kind of liked Alex Forsyth coming out of Oregon. And then defensively, I don't think they have any major weaknesses, but outside of Pat Surtain, I don't think they have any true strengths either. Baron Browning and Nick Benito have a lot of upside. We'll see if one of them can emerge as more consistent, productive pass rushers. Zach Allen, John Franklin Myers, DJ Jones, that's a pretty solid interior trio. Jaquan McMillan was one of the leading forces behind their defensive resurgence last year, but Levi Wallace, I think, is a real question at CB2. And to end this tier, we've got the Tennessee Titans at 24. You can see the overall ratings from the Raiders to the Titans are so close together. I really don't have a hard take about the separation of any of these teams. If I change a tight end from a 78 to a 79, it's affecting the rankings. For the Titans, the most important thing is just getting consistent play from Will Levis. I like a lot of the flashes that he showed as a rookie, but you need to see more consistent accuracy, more consistent decision making. I feel as optimistic about Levis as I've ever felt for a young Titans quarterback, but I also liked him a lot as a prospect, so there's definitely some bias going on there. Their running backs are pretty good. They've got an old but good trio of receivers, and I think there's a chance that they finally won't have a historically bad left tackle. The left side of the offensive line actually has a chance to be a strength, but regardless of who wins the camp battle at right guard and right tackle, I expect both of those spots to be weaknesses, and you need Bill Callahan to work his magic there. Defensively, they are really good at corner, 5th best cornerback room in the NFL. The interior D-line is another strength of this defense. Obviously, you've got Jeffrey Simmons, but assuming that Tavondre Sweat can be on the field, I think he'll at least be a solid nose tackle, and then Sebastian Joseph Day is a good 3rd D lineman. They added Jamal Adams, but I still worry about the safety depth. I worry about the depth at edge rusher, and then the linebacker room should be one of the worst in the league unless Cedric Gray hits the ground running. So I think the 5 teams in this second tier, I wouldn't project them as playoff teams, but they all have a lot of realistic avenues to where they could exceed my expectations. Last year, I had the Rams and Texans ranked in the 20s, so don't let me ruin your excitement. But I think there's a significant jump in overall team talent when we get up to this next tier, which starts with my 23rd ranked team, the Seattle Seahawks. You've got a good quarterback in Geno Smith, an excellent running back duo with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. Tyler Lockett's kind of on the downswing of his career, but with him, Metcalf, and Jackson Smith and Jigba, this is a really good receiver trio. Their main weakness offensively is the O-line. I feel the best about Charles Cross, but even he's been kind of inconsistent over the last couple years. I loved Christian Haynes as a prospect, but he's a rookie, and I think the interior should be below average. And then Abraham Lucas was much worse in year 2 than he was as a rookie, and he has major injury concerns concerns, so there's a good chance you're going to be relying on George Fant or Stone Forsythe at some point. I've got them with the 21st ranked defense, definitely being lifted up some by a pretty high defensive coordinator score for Mike Macdonald. Another defensive roster that I don't think has glaring weaknesses, but not a lot of major strengths. It's a solid edge duo with Boye Mafe and Uchenna Nwosu. Hopefully Derek Hall can improve in his second year. I like a lot of the options they have on the interior, and it actually looks like Draymond Jones might be playing some on the edge this year, but they've got Leonard Williams and also added Byron Murphy in the first round of the draft. Linebacker is not great, and Jerome Baker's starting off on the PUP list, so that could end up being a weakness. And the safeties are in that tier where it's not a strength of your defense, but probably not something that's going to hold you back either. The cornerback room is really exciting. I think Devin Witherspoon is their best defensive player. He had a defensive rookie of the year caliber season last year. Reek Woolen is a great cover corner, completely disinterested in run defense. And then Michael Jackson is slotted as their cornerback 2. I think he's more of a replacement level starter, but he actually had some decent flashes last year towards the end of the season. I've got the Tampa Bay Bucks as my 22nd ranked team. They ranked 24th on offense, 7th on defense. Baker Mayfield had a career resurgence last year. I'm open to the idea that I'm underselling him with a 76. At receiver, they've got Mike Evans, Chris Godwin still going strong, and some intriguing young players with Trey Palmer and Jalen McMillan. The O-line is a good example of something that we'll see with some other teams where it's difficult to capture the difference between an offensive line with a few really good players and some major weaknesses and one that's just solid across the board. Tristan Wirfs was an elite right tackle for a couple years and then an elite left tackle last season. Luke Gedeke really improved in year 2 and was helped moving from guard to tackle. You want to see a similar jump from Cody Mock, who I thought really struggled as a rookie. I think Graham Barton was a great pick, but you're asking a lot of a rookie center. And then Ben Bredesen at left guard, I have major concerns about. And then they've got the 7th ranked defense led by a lot of familiar faces over the last few years. Antoine Winfield Jr., Levante David, Vita Vea, Jamel Dean. The one weak spot on this side of the ball is edge rusher. Joe Tryon has just never emerged as a number 1. Yaya Diaby had a productive rookie season, but watching his tape, a lot of his sacks came off of stunts and twists, which just isn't very repeatable year after year. They have some other promising young players. Kalijah Kancey was a really good pass rusher as a rookie, but one of the worst run defending D linemen in the league last year. KJ Britt was an immediate upgrade to Devin White once he started getting playing time. Christian Izien as a UDFA defensive back showed a lot of nice things as a rookie, and then I really liked Tyke Smith as a prospect, but I am slightly concerned about the starting outside corner opposite of Jamel Dean. I thought Zion McCollum showed flashes last year, but way too inconsistent. He has so much natural talent, but you got to see him put it all together. Next up, we've got the LA Chargers at 21. They have the 3 most important positions taken care of. They've got a great quarterback, a great left tackle, and a great head coach. And I'm very confident in Joe Alt, so I think there's a chance they've got both tackles taken care of for the foreseeable future. The interior O-line is a little more shaky. Zion Johnson has been a major disappointment, but overall they still rank 9th in the NFL because of the tackle play. But the main thing that's holding back this offense is what I have as the worst receiver room in the NFL. That's to be expected when you get rid of Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Really liked Ladd McConkey as a prospect. Josh Palmer is a solid 2nd or 3rd wide receiver. Quentin Johnston, there's a chance that he kind of emerges if they can get him on a more appropriate route tree with more deep overs and crosses, but I just didn't see anything from his rookie year that has me optimistic. I think it should be a run-heavy offense. Receiver is a real weakness, but there's a chance with the pieces that they have that they could patch something competitive together. But the defense ranks 29th. I am excited about the potential upgrade from Brandon Staley to Jesse Minter, but I think there's some real holes with the personnel at certain spots. I do like their edge rushers. Khalil Mack has resisted age regression. Hopefully he can continue that, but Joey Bosa has regressed and really struggled to stay healthy. It wouldn't surprise me if Tuli Tuipulotu ends up taking his spot as the second edge. He showed a lot of potential as a rookie, although he did kind of tail off as the season progressed. But the D-line is a major weakness, as it's been for what seems like like the past decade. I'm really excited to watch Dion Henley, but I can't give him anything higher than a 75 because he didn't really play much as a rookie. Junior Colson, of anyone in this linebacker class, has the best chance to be a plug-and-play starter, but again, rookie linebackers can't give them much higher than a 75. And the cornerback room ranks 31st. Asante Samuel is a solid starter. He's never really taken that next step that I wanted to see from him. Definitely a quality starter, but someone that ideally is your second best corner. Christian Fulton, for most of his career, was in a similar tier as Asante Samuel Jr. Last year, he completely fell off a cliff and was almost unplayable. Hopefully he can bounce back, but his tape last year was pretty brutal. And then Jasir Taylor in the slot had some moments last year, but I think is a below average starter. They do have really good safeties though, with Derwin James and Alohi Gilman. Gilman was one of the most impressive players that I've watched this summer. At 20, I've got the Chicago Bears, who I just did a video on. I think the offense is a pretty simple two-path situation. Either Caleb Williams is good immediately, and this is a top 15 to top 12 offense, or he's kind of inconsistent as a rookie and the offense in turn is inconsistent week to week. He has a really good setup though for the first overall pick. 6th ranked receivers, DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen, one of the best weapon situations for a first round quarterback in recent memory. The offensive line doesn't have any star players yet, although I think Darnell Wright could become that, but they don't have any true weaknesses either. And then this was one of the best defenses in the NFL over the final 75% of last year. They had a rough weeks 1 through 4. After that, they were top 5 in pretty much every major statistical category. The cornerback room is outstanding. I think Tyreek Stevenson in year 2 could easily perform better than a 77. Kyler Gordon's another player that's steadily improved and could take another jump as well. They have 3 really good linebackers with TJ Edwards, Tremaine Edmonds, and Jack Sanborn. And then they traded for Montez Sweat last season, and he was immediately their most productive pass rusher by far. But the main things holding this defense back is they pretty much have no edge depth, and on the defensive line, you're entirely relying on Gervon Dexter to take a huge jump in year 2. He was solid as a rookie, but not someone that you could rely on for consistent pressure. You need to see him develop his pass rushing plan, continue to win with power. Outside of that, unless Zach Pickens really surprises, they don't have a lot of other avenues to get interior pressure. And then I'm going to end this third tier with the Minnesota Vikings, who I have as my 19th best team. And the Bears have gotten a lot of attention as being the best or one of the best situations for a rookie quarterback to step into of all time. And I think Caleb Williams has a great surrounding core, but to me, the Vikings setup is a step ahead of what the Bears have. They rank 19th on offense, but most of that's being held back by the quarterback ratings. I've got JJ McCarthy and Sam Darnold at 71. It seems like Sam Darnold is going to be the starter. I don't have incredibly high hopes for him, but I am interested to see what he looks like with better weapons and better protection. But I have Kevin O'Connell as tied for the 5th best offensive coordinator in the league, and every other position group offensively ranks in the top 10. Aaron Jones is a really good running back coming over from Green Bay. Justin Jefferson, obviously one of the best players in the league regardless of position. Jordan Addison, I think, has somewhat of a ceiling as a player, but really solid wide receiver too. You've got TJ Hawkinson at tight end and Josh Oliver, who's a great blocking tight end, and I don't think the guards are great. I especially worry about Blake Brindle at left guard, but it's one of the best tackle duos in the NFL with Christian Darrisaw, who just got paid, and Brian O'Neill at right tackle. If Sam Darnold ends up being the player that some people are still holding out hope he can be, or JJ McCarthy is ready to go at some point this season, this could be a very good offense, and I think it'll at least be average, even if the quarterback play isn't great. But I do worry about the defensive personnel. Brian Flores is a great DC, although his scheme kind of got figured out a little bit down the stretch last season. I don't even say that as a true criticism of Brian Flores. It's just there's a limit to how far you can go just purely scheming up a good defense. With Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, and Dallas Turner, I think it's a solid edge rotation. You've got some interesting linebackers with Ivan Pace and Blake Cashman. You want to see Pace develop into a more complete player. I think, there's a limit to how complete he can be at his size. And then Blake Cashman just has to stay healthy. He's been really good whenever he's been on the field, but the D-line is one of the worst in the NFL, and I think cornerback and safety are slightly below average. There are some young players, though, that I could see developing and improving this unit. Caleb Evans and Mekhi Blackman, I think, have some potential at corner. If Dallas Turner can be a high-impact pass rusher as a rookie, that would obviously help. But overall, I think this team is a year away from being truly competitive. I do like the young players that they've added and the core that they've established, though. Moving up a tier here to teams that if they didn't make the playoffs, I think it would be a really disappointing season. And we're going to start that with the Indianapolis Colts, who I have at 18. I always hate to say that it all comes down to the quarterback because it sounds like a cop-out answer, but that is really the case with teams like the Colts. Anthony Richardson played a few games last year and to me showed a little bit of everything that makes you excited and concerned about his future as a starting quarterback. You saw some insane throws. The arm talent is obvious. I really like some of the stuff he's able to do with pocket navigation and avoiding pressure. You saw the rushing ability, although it's hard to know how much they're going to feature that aspect of his game, wanting to keep him healthy. But there were also some accuracy issues, a couple bad decisions. With such a small sample size and the fact that he kind of showed every element of his profile as a prospect, I don't really think your opinion on Anthony Richardson should be that much different from your opinion on him coming out of college. I loved Anthony Richardson as a prospect, so naturally I'm going to be a lot more optimistic than some other people, but it's really just a wait and see situation. My thoughts on him and Will Levis are so close to one another. You've just got to see it all put together in consistent quarterback play. I like their receivers. I want to see them feature Josh Downs more as a downfield route runner. I'm sure part of it had to do with Gardner Minshew being the quarterback, but it seemed like every Josh Downs route last year was within 8 yards of the line of scrimmage. I could also see Jelani Woods being a surprise impact player. I think a lot of people have forgotten about him with the injury last year. And then outside of Braden Smith, who every year has been a really good right tackle, I think every one of their starting offensive linemen had their stock go up from last season. Bernard Raymond really broke out as a high-quality starting left tackle. Quentin Nelson and Ryan Kelly got back to the level of play that we had grown accustomed to for most of their career, and then Will Fries emerged as a good starter at right guard. So it's the second best O-line, good receivers, really good running backs, excellent play caller with Shane Steichen. The offense really all comes down to what Anthony Richardson is in year two. The defense is really good up front. It's one of the deepest edge rotations in the NFL. You just want one of these guys to emerge as a true number one pass rusher. Kwity Paye is more of a run defender. A lot of it comes down to how quickly Laiatu Latu can hit the ground running. The interior, I think, is the best in the NFL with DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart, and Raekwon Davis. And then Zaire Franklin and EJ Speed are two linebackers that hardly ever get talked about, but are really good players. My main concern on this defense is the secondary. Julius Brents had some flashes as a rookie, but it was really inconsistent play overall. I think his speed might be a real limitation on the outside. And then you've got a lot of solid later drafted players like Dallas Flowers and Jalen Jones. I like what they showed for their draft position, and I think they're at least good depth, but I'm not sure about them as starters. At 17, I've got the Pittsburgh Steelers, 23rd best offense, but 4th ranked defense. Russell Wilson was kind of a league average starter last year. I would expect that level of play to continue. I really like the running back duo with Jalen Warren and Najee Harris, and then their top 2 receiving options are great with George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth, but I don't know who else they're going to throw the ball to. They either need Roman Wilson to surprise as a rookie or Calvin Austin to take a major jump in year 2. And then on the offensive line, I really like all the moves that they've made to rebuild this unit. It's just a lot of young players that you're relying on. Troy Fautanu and Zach Frazier, I like the picks. I just have to have lower ratings for them as rookies. Their guards are really good, but then Broderick Jones, you need to see a lot more consistent play from him in pass protection. There were certain games down the stretch last season where he was the liability on this offensive line. But then I really like everything about this defense except for their slot corner. TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, and Nick Herbig is an outstanding edge trio. Keanu Benton was one of the more underrated rookies from last season. You've still got Cam Hayward. The linebacker room should be solid. You've got Joey Porter, who's a shutdown press corner, but then Dante Jackson's kind of a question at cornerback too, and I don't know who their starting nickel is going to be. I've got Darius Rush in there right now, but a 5th round pick that played 40 snaps in his rookie season, I just have no idea what to expect there. My 16th team is the Atlanta Falcons. They have the 13th best offense, 19th best defense. They made a huge upgrade at quarterback, bringing in Kirk Cousins. Assuming he's able to come back at full strength from the injury, this should be one of the most improved offenses in the league. With Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, and Drake London, I think they have really good weapons weapons at their skill positions. I do worry some about their receivers outside of London, though. Rondale Moore, Darnell Mooney, I think are marginal starters. And then the O-line is a really good run blocking unit. There are some weaknesses in pass pro, especially with Drew Dahlman, Matthew Bergeron. But overall, I think this unit should get back to playing like you would expect based on the talent they have on paper. And then the defense is really solid outside of the worst group of edge rushers in the league. They've invested a lot in that position, but nobody's really popped up to this point. So you need to see some development there. But you've got AJ Terrell, one of the best press corners in the league. Jesse Bates, arguably the best free safety in the NFL. I think Caden Ellis is one of the more underrated linebackers and players in general. And then Grady Jarrett's coming off the injury, but I think David Onyemata had a strong performance last year. My 15th ranked team is the Jacksonville Jaguars, 15th best offense, 11th best defense. They extended Trevor Lawrence, which I think was clearly the right decision. A lot of people really don't like him as a quarterback, so I've kind of ended up on the pro Trevor Lawrence side of things. I think you definitely want to see more consistent play. You know, he's not free of blame, needs to eliminate a lot of the turnovers especially, but in my opinion, he's a clear top 10 quarterback that can elevate an offense and be the leading force behind a successful team. The rest of their offense, I think, is very above average. Brian Thomas Jr. has game-changing potential. I think that Anton Harrison has a ton of upside, especially as a pass protector. And then Evan Ingram, Travis Etienne, Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, there's a lot of really good weapons, but not guys that are like top 10 at their position. And it's the same thing with the offensive line. I think on paper, they should be much improved from last year. They don't have any true weaknesses, but especially in the run game, you just need to see a step forward from the unit as a whole. I've got them with the 6th best edge rushers. Josh Allen had a breakout season. Trayvon Walker has steadily, gradually improved every year. I don't think he was as good of a pass rusher as his pressures and sacks would tell you. It was a lot of cleanup, pursuit, kind of hustle pressures, but he did show improvement from year 1 to year 2, and he still has so much athletic upside, so I'm still optimistic to see what he can develop into. And then Eric Armstead was a really good free agency signing to give them some interior pressure. I really like the linebacker duo of Devin Lloyd and Foye Oluokun. Devin Lloyd's got to stop dropping so many interceptions. I think people would rate him a lot higher if he just was able to convert some of those. And then the secondary is pretty interesting. Tyson Campbell I have as an 80, and if there's any player that I might have rated too low, it's Tyson Campbell. In his second year in 2022, he broke out and I think was on his way to being a true number 1 corner. Year 3 was a lot less consistent, so I moved him down to an 80, but I just learned that he was dealing with a hamstring injury all year, so that could be the reason for his drop off in play. I think Ronald Darby is still a really solid cornerback too, so if Campbell returns to form, this is a lot better than the 27th best cornerback room. And Andre Sisco is a playmaking safety, just got to see more consistency from him. At 14, I've got the Green Bay Packers, who rank 14th on offense, 13th on defense, and they have one of the most exciting young cores of offensive players of anyone in the NFL. Jordan Love obviously had the breakout season last year. The receiver room, I've never seen anything like it, where you've got so many players on the 2nd or 3rd year of their rookie contract that just have so much upside but have already proven to be quality starters. There's a big cluster of players rated between 80 and 83, but you're hoping that at least one of these guys can emerge and be a true number 1. And then you've also got Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft at tight end that showed some flashes as rookies. The offensive line I think should be solid. Matt LaFleur does a really good job of protecting them from too many exposed dropbacks. I've got Zach Tom at center because that's what he was listed when I set up this roster, but I just saw that he was working at right tackle with the first team. Overall, they've got a great play caller in Matt LaFleur and really no weaknesses from a personnel standpoint, so I expect them to pick up where they left off. And I'm projecting the defense to be a unit that has a major jump from what they showed in 2023. Outside of linebacker, which ranks 29th, I think they're in the top half in every position group, and there's a lot of young players that could take big jumps. You've got Rashawn Gary, Kenny Clark, Jair Alexander, and Xavier McKinney, who are established high-quality starters, but then Lucas Van Ness, Devontae Wyatt, Carl Brooks, Quay Walker, Eric Stokes, Carrington Valentine. There's so many young defensive players that have shown flashes, but have either been inconsistent or struggled with injuries. And then they've also got rookies in Edrin Cooper and Javon Bullard, who I really liked his prospects, and we'll see how quickly they can contribute. And the tier cutoffs become pretty arbitrary once we get into the top half of the league, but I'm going to draw the line after my 13th ranked team, which is the Houston Texans. On offense, I think they're top half of the league in every position besides running back, which is the position to have a weakness if you've got to have one. You've got CJ Stroud being protected by one of the best pass protecting left tackles in Laramie Tunzel, solid right tackle in Titus Howard, and he's throwing to an elite group of receivers in Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and Stephon Diggs. I do have Stephon Diggs as their third best receiver. Part of that's because I think he took a slight step back last year, but I'm also very high on Tank Dell and Nico Collins. I worry some about the interior offensive linemen outside of Shaq Mason. Kenyon Green has never really looked good in the NFL, and he's coming off an injury. Maybe Blake Fisher's able to win one of those jobs, or maybe play right tackle and they move Titus Howard back inside. And I'd also like to see them trade Dameon Pierce to a gap-heavy offense. He just can't run outside zone for whatever reason, but if you get him running power and counter, he's truly a top 10 running back in my opinion. And then the defense is going to rank 23rd. They're led by an excellent edge rusher duo with Will Anderson Jr. and Daniil Hunter. Anderson already had a great rookie season, and now he's added a bunch of weight. His bull rush should be even more effective. I've got Danico Autry listed on the defensive line, but he's really more of a defensive end that can slide inside on pass rushing downs. He's not like a true 3 technique. And as far as early down interior defensive linemen, I think that is one weakness on this roster. Christian Harris had some moments last year, and Azeez Al-Shaair is a pretty solid linebacker. Derek Stingley was finally able to stay healthy and showed why a lot of people had him as the best corner in his draft class. Kamari Lassiter's gotten a lot of early training camp hype. I liked him as a prospect, but got to be conservative with rookie corner ratings. And then Jeff Okudah is kind of a marginal starting corner, very aggressive, and that can get him into trouble sometimes. I was really disappointed with Jalen Petrie. After an outstanding rookie season, he took a major step back in year 2. If you watch Derek Stingley's highlights, like 80% of them are just him correcting a Jalen Petrie mistake. The next tier is teams that expect to make the playoffs, but if they don't make the Super Bowl, I think this season will be viewed as a disappointment. And that starts off with my 12th ranked team, the Cincinnati Bengals. You've got the same basic offensive setup with Joe Burrow returning from injury, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins on the outside. This is the second best receiver room in the NFL in my opinion. If Jermaine Burton can hit the ground running, I think that's a great wide receiver 3. If not, they've shown to be able to get by with Trenton Irwin. The offensive line doesn't have any stars, but they do have 3 starting caliber tackles, which most teams don't have. Unless Joe Burrow really slows down coming off of injury, I think this should be a top 10 offense. And then I did a full breakdown on the Bengals defense, which I think is one of the most interesting units in the NFL. They were one of the worst defenses in the league last year, took a major step back from the previous couple seasons, and they've invested so much on this side of the ball through the draft, preparing for all of the veterans that they've had to get rid of. Now it's time to see those players develop and emerge as players that you can count on. Trey Hendrickson and Mike Hilton are the stars of this defense. You've also got really solid starters in Cam Taylor-Britt, Von Bell. The linebackers took a step back last year, but I still have confidence in that duo. But the success of this unit really hinges on Myles Murphy, DJ Turner, and Dax Hill. You've got Dax Hill moving from safety to corner. He really struggled at safety. DJ Turner had a rough rookie season, but I liked him as a prospect. And then Myles Murphy was a rotational player, had some flashes as a rookie, but you need a consistent second edge rusher to Trey Hendrickson. Next up, we've got the Dallas Cowboys, who are such a boring team to talk about because year after year, they have a great roster, they have a lot of regular season success, and then they just crumble in the playoffs. I still think the top end talent on this roster stacks up with pretty much anyone. Dak Prescott had the best season of his career in 2023. You could say the same thing for CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson, Tyler Smith. They do have the worst running backs in the NFL and as many questions on the offensive line as they've had in recent memory. I think Tyler Guyton was a solid pick, but I don't expect him to be great as a rookie. I think he was more raw coming out than Tyler Smith was. Cooper Beebe as a center next year and then maybe a long-term replacement for Zach Martin, I feel really good about. And then you need a bounce back season from Terrence Steele. But overall, it's the 11th best offense. I'm sure they'll carve up the Commanders and the Giants. Just need to see them do that in the playoffs. And then the defense ranks 6th. They're top 10 in the 2 most important positions, edge rusher and cornerback. Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence is an incredible edge rusher duo. I was disappointed with Sam Williams' second year after a really promising rookie season, but they also added Marshawn Kneeland, who I liked. And then you've got Trayvon Diggs and Deron Bland probably on the outside. But the 2 weaknesses are the interior defensive line and linebacker. Osa Odighizuwa is a really good player, but you need something from Mozzie Smith, and they have options at linebacker, so hopefully one of Damone Clark, DeMarvion Overshown, and Maurice Liufau can step up and be a solid starter. Now into the top 10, we've got the LA Rams, who have the biggest split between offense and defense. Their offense ranks second and their defense ranks 30th. Matthew Stafford's a top 5 quarterback, a really good running back room with Kyron Williams and Blake Corum. There isn't a lot of depth at receiver, but Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua is about as good as it gets for your top 2, and they've done a great job rebuilding this O-line. I love the right half with Steve Avila, Kevin Dotson, and Rob Havenstein, who's just a consistent high-quality starter. But defensively, they are very young and are going to have to replace the best defensive player of my lifetime. I think Kobe Turner is one of the best young defensive linemen in the NFL. You could have made an argument for him as Defensive Rookie of the Year. Bobby Brown's pretty good when he's been healthy. Byron Young had a solid rookie year. And then you've got the rookies Jared Verse and Braden Fisk. Ernest Jones had an outstanding season in 2023. Really like him as their LB1. And then they added Darius Williams and Tre'Davious White. Williams is a ball hawk corner, kind of in the Trayvon Diggs mold. He'll give up some plays, but also makes a lot of plays on the ball. And Tre'Davious White, I think, is still solid. We just got to see where he's at from a health perspective. Obviously, if their draft class has the kind of impact that the 2023 class did, this will be a lot better than the 30th best defense, but you can't bank on that happening every year. At 9, I've got the Buffalo Bills, who have the 5th best offense and 18th best defense. They offloaded a lot of veterans to kind of clear the cap, but I actually think they've done a solid job over the last few draft classes of infusing this roster with young talent. Josh Allen I have as the 2nd best quarterback in the league. I think James Cook showed a lot of nice things last year. He's got to stop dropping so many passes. Their receivers rank 30th, although I think Khalil Shakir could definitely outperform a 78 if he continues to develop, and Curtis Samuel is really solid. Keon Coleman I wasn't a big fan of as a prospect, but hopefully he can exceed my expectations. But that's balanced out by the 9th best tight end room, led by Dalton Kincaid, who I thought performed great down the stretch. The first 75% of his rookie season, it was just so many option routes within 8 yards of the line of scrimmage. Towards the end of the year, they started letting him run more stuff down the field, and you saw how much of a dynamic playmaker he can be. And then it's a good offensive line. Deion Dawkins is a borderline star left tackle, and Spencer Brown took a major step forward last year. So it's kind of an unconventional distribution of talent, but I think this offense should be one of the best in the NFL. And then the defense is solid, but not spectacular in most spots. Greg Rousseau and Ed Oliver are quality starters. You have 3 really good corners in Christian Binford, Rasul Douglas, and Taron Johnson. Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard is a solid linebacker duo. The main weakness is safety, losing both of their starters for the last 8 to 10 years. If Cole Bishop can be good as a rookie, that would really help out this secondary. My 8th ranked team is the Philadelphia Eagles, 6th best offense, 10th best defense. Every offensive unit ranks in the top half of the league. You've got Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley in the backfield. The 5th ranked receivers and tight ends, led by A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert. And even with the loss of Jason Kelce, I still have this as the best offensive line in the NFL. They've got the best tackle duo with Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata. Landon Dickerson is a borderline all-pro caliber guard. I think right guard could be the one major weakness. If that's the only weak spot, I think they can protect that, but you really need Cam Jurgens to emerge as a quality starter as their Jason Kelce replacement. And I have them with the 10th ranked defense, but they are relying on a lot of young players. Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean are rookies. Keely Ringo's a second-year player. Nakobe Dean, you need to emerge as a good starter. I have them with the worst linebacker room right now. And then you've got players like Nolan Smith, Jordan Davis, who they've drafted in the last few years that have been solid, but definitely have more potential than what they've shown. But there is still a lot of proven talent with Bryce Huff, Jalen Carter, Brandon Graham, Darius Slay. Gardner Johnson returning should improve their safety play. It's kind of like I said with the Bengals defense. On paper, they've done a good job of addressing their needs and planning for the future through the draft. It's just time for them to prove it on the field. And to end this tier, I've got the Miami Dolphins at 7th. The offense I don't expect to slow down. I think the concerns about their level of play later in the season, especially in the playoffs, I think those are valid. But on paper, they've still got one of the best collections of skill position talent that we've ever seen. Tua, like I said, I have concerns about his ability under pressure when the play breaks down. But as far as just delivering the ball on time, accurately, within structure, he's more than good enough. I think there are weaknesses on the offensive line outside of Teron Armstead. more so than any offense in the NFL, the Dolphins do a really good job of protecting their offensive linemen. And I think that's another element that kind of contributes to the difference in their performance, first half of the regular season compared to the playoffs and down the stretch, big moments. And I have this as the 5th best defense, although there are a couple questions. The first one is Jalen Phillips returning from injury. I've got him as an 86, but there's definitely a chance that he's a step slow in this first year coming back. And then it's the 6th best cornerback room, but you're relying on Jalen Ramsey and Kendall Fuller, who are older players approaching that point of age regression. But there's a lot of talent outside of that. Bradley Chubb, Javon Holland, David Long, Zach Sealer. This should be a really good unit, assuming they can stave off age regression for one more year. And then I'm going to start this next tier of Super Bowl favorites with my 6th ranked team, the Detroit Lions. They have the 7th best offense, 12th best defense, but one of the best head coaches in the league. And offensively, it's a really solid unit across the board. Jared Goff is really good when he's kept clean. Amon-Ra St. Brown is arguably the best slot receiver in the NFL. You need Jameson Williams to emerge as a productive outside receiver, but you've also got Khalif Raymond, Sam Laporta, and then Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery is an excellent running back duo. And the offensive line is outstanding, led by Frank Ragnow, one of the best centers in the NFL, and Penei Sewell, arguably the best right tackle in the NFL, depending on how much you weight pass blocking versus run blocking. I think the defense is above average, but it could be great if one of the rookie corners is able to contribute at a high level early. Between Carlton Davis, Terrion Arnold, Ennis Rakestraw, and Amik Robinson, you've got a lot of options at outside corner. My biggest concern is that all of their corners, their biggest weakness is speed. They don't really have someone that can match a true deep threat on the outside, but Brian Branch is already one of the best slot corners in the league. You've got DJ Reader and Ali McNeil, which is an excellent interior duo. Aiden Hutchinson had 120 pressures last year, but I worry about their second edge rusher. And then hopefully Jack Campbell can improve specifically in coverage in year 2. He was a solid run defender as a rookie, but a liability on third down at times. My 5th ranked team is the Cleveland Browns, and this is arguably the best roster in the NFL if you ignore quarterback. I think the days of Deshaun Watson being a top half of the league starter are pretty much behind us, but you need him to at least be average. You've got a top 5 offensive line, Nick Chubb, David Njoku, Amari Cooper. You want someone to emerge as wide receiver 2. I think if Amari Cooper gets injured, they're in a bad place as far as weaponry on the outside, but the starting offense is about as good as it gets, again, outside of quarterback. And they also have the best third tackle in the NFL with DeJuan Jones, who actually have rated ahead of Jedrick Wills. And then this is the best defense in the league, in my opinion. Best edge rushers, second best corners. They have star players at every level of their defense, and a lot of them, like JOK, Grant Delpit, Martin Emerson, Greg Newsome, these are all players that are continuing to develop and could be even better than what we saw last season. I think Jim Schwartz is a good defensive coordinator, but in my opinion, this is a unit that's led by the personnel. He isn't really reinventing the wheel. He's just playing man coverage and rushing 4. And as you saw in the playoff game against Houston, if you have an off day or you've got some backups in there like Ronnie Hickman, you can get exposed by a talented offense and the whole thing can just collapse. But just as far as rating the players, I think this is the best defense in the NFL, and there's no one that can just line up and play the way that the Browns can. My 4th ranked team is the New York Jets, who I just did a video on. I think they have the most talented roster in the NFL, but I do have them with the worst coaching staff in the league, and more so than anyone else, they're relying on injury luck, especially on the offensive side of the ball. You've got Aaron Rodgers coming off the Achilles, Mike Williams missed most of last season, Tyron Smith had a healthy year in 2023, but historically he's been a very injury-prone player, and Elijah Vera Tucker hasn't been able to make it past week 8 either of the last 2 years. But aside from injuries and coaching, which I know are huge factors, I really like every aspect of this roster. You've got a great tackle duo, a true wide receiver 1 in Garrett Wilson, who's just never had good quarterback play. Same thing with Breece Hall. I think he's one of the best running backs in the NFL. If you just give him some space, he can be a game-changing weapon. And then it's the second best defense with the best cornerback room, second best linebackers. I really don't like the move from Bryce Huff to Hassan Reddick, but you've got Jermaine Johnson, who I think is an ascending star. I was a big fan of Will McDonald coming out. I think he could replace the Bryce Huff role, and then an elite 3 technique and Quinnen Williams on the inside. My 3rd ranked team is the Baltimore Ravens, who are transitioning at a few positions, but I still think have the core pieces to compete for a Super Bowl. You've got an elite backfield duo with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. I really like Mark Andrews, Zay Flowers, and Rashad Bateman as your top 3 pass catchers. There are some major questions questions at O-line outside of Linderbaum. Ronnie Stanley did not look good last year, and you've got new starters with Andrew Voorhees and rookie Roger Rosengarten. You've at least got Patrick McCarry as insurance, but I do expect this O-line to struggle early on. And the defense ranks 9th. I think there's a lot of star power with Kyle Hamilton and Marcus Williams, Roquan Smith, Justin Madubuike. Michael Pierce is so underrated at nose tackle, but I think the two biggest questions are edge rusher and cornerback. You want to see one of Odafe Owe or David Ajabo take a jump, and then you need Nate Wiggins to be good early, and you need Brandon Stevens to maintain his level of play from last season. I don't expect anyone to be surprised with my top 2 teams, and I'm actually going to make them a tier of their own. At number 2, we've got the San Francisco 49ers. They have the 3rd best offense, 3rd best defense. Brock Purdy really impressed me last year. It's difficult to separate a quarterback from such a good supporting cast and really evaluate them individually as a player, but from his last year in college to his rookie year to his second year in the NFL, he's improved every single offseason, and this is the first time he actually has a full offseason. When a player shows improvement like that in back-to-back years, I really open my mind to them having a lot higher of a ceiling than I initially expected. But you've got the best running back in the NFL, the best tight end room in the NFL, 4th best wide receivers. Another example of an offensive line that's led by one star player but has some weaknesses outside of that. Trent Williams is great, but the rest of the starters are very questionable. You want to see Dominic Pooney win a job in camp, but overall there's no reason to expect this offense to slow down. And I feel a similar way about the defense. I mean, this team just has star power at every position. Nick Bosa is one of the best two-way edge defenders in the NFL. You've got an elite linebacker duo in Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw, although Greenlaw is coming off the injury, but they have some good insurance with the addition of Devondre Campbell, and they also drafted D. Winters a couple years ago. Charvarius Ward was outstanding last year. I love the Renardo Green pick. Diamador Lenore I thought had a mini breakout season. He can play slot or outside. And then you've got Talanoa Hufanga returning from injury. Jair Brown had a promising first year. There aren't any holes in this defensive roster and really this roster as a whole. But my number 1 team is the Kansas City Chiefs, led by the best quarterback and the best coaching staff in the league. The receivers rank 27th, but they obviously have Travis Kelce, and with Marquise Brown, Xavier Worthy, and Rashee Rice, I think they could be able to open things up more on the outside this year. It's the best interior offensive line in the NFL with Joe Thuney, Creed Humphrey, and Trey Smith. Jawan Taylor is fine as right tackle, but left tackle is going to be a big training camp battle. I would lean Wanya Morris, but Kingsley Suamataia will be in that competition. And then the defense, I think, might take a step back from last year, but it should be a top 10 unit. Their edge rushers aren't great, although I do like George Karlaftis. Obviously, you've got Chris Jones on the defensive line. Great trio of linebackers with Nick Bolton, Leo Chanel, and Drew Tranquill. And then cornerback is the real question. You've got Trent McDuffie, who can play slot or outside. Jalen Watson and Joshua Williams are solid young players, but I think it will be a step down, obviously, from L'Jarius Sneed. And then maybe Najee Johnson or Kamal Haddon can compete for one of those spots. And then Shamari Connor I have as a safety, but I actually saw that he was playing in the slot, and then they had Trent McDuffie on the outside, so it'll be interesting to see how that group sorts itself out.